South African elections analysts are making a critical mistake, and it needs to be addressed. While there's a growing number of South African political analysts, and more specifically elections analysts, regardless of how many there are, it seems as if there's a common gap of knowledge that they seem to all share. And this is very concerning to me, because if these people who we trust to be our elections analysts keep on having this gap of knowledge, then how are we actually supposed to get a full picture of what's really going on in elections? Now, I myself have been doing a lot of by-elections analysis for those of you who subscribe to the channel, but the problem is that, look, first of all, I don't consider myself to be an expert or a professional in any specific way. It's just something that I do to improve my understanding and hopefully help you as well. But beyond that, I'm also not somebody who's super well known. Yeah, I've got around 15,000 subscribers, but we're talking about people who probably show up on podcasts with hundreds of thousands of subscribers. And so ultimately, they're the ones who are going to be a lot more well known than me. So before I delve into the issue and basically give my recommendation of how to fix it, could you please remember just to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already? It's completely free, and all you have to do is click on the subscribe button below. Also, if you would like to enjoy some additional perks and support the channel, you can do so by becoming a Power Club member. All you have to do is click on the join button below the video. Now let's get started. I'm going to start off by showing you a video of Wayne Susman, who's an elections analyst, I would say probably the most famous, speaking on Biz News. And what he's specifically speaking about here is the Tshwane election earlier this year, where the Freedom Front Plus almost beat the DA. Now, I'm a big fan of Wayne Susman, and I find that something that he does really well is that he paints a picture of what's going on the ground in the ward. So he'll speak about where the ward is, what the voting districts are. Is there any sort of famous place that's in the vicinity? Who are the people? What sort of income they have, their demographic background. He talks about things like that, and I really enjoy that because it gives us a full perspective on who is actually there in the ward. But even then, as we go through this quick video, you'll see how he doesn't really go much deeper than that. But let me play the video so you can see what he says, and I will give my commentary afterwards.
Okay, let's go over to Tshwane then.
Yeah, as the results came out and I was up, I usually go to sleep early. That's my secret. We'll share with the audience. I go to sleep early on election nights. Last night I stayed up. This is a very interesting result because the George results came in first. And this area is very close to the SuperSport Park Cricket Stadium, famous cricket stadium, in the Centurion part, in the areas of Littleton and De Hoovers. And the DA's vote share did decline from 59% to 53%. But the Freedom Front are the big story here, growing from 16% to 44%. Very impressive showing by the Freedom Front. We saw a by-election, I think it was 2024, where it was in the area in the east of Pretoria, the Freedom Front gave the DA a scare. In other subsequent by-elections in traditional DA areas, the DA did very, very well to reassert themselves and establish themselves as the dominant force in these suburban wards. Last night, the Freedom Front came very close, within about 250 votes, if my numbers are correct, of beating the DA and causing another major political shock.
So just before we continue, I really like the fact that he mentioned the 250 vote margin, because that's already giving us a little bit of added perspective that some other analysts don't even bother giving us. But let's just continue.
And Chris, this is why it's always important to go into the voting districts. In this Ward 57, there is the area of Littleton, where the DA and the Freedom Front have historically done the best. And then next to it is the area of De Hoovers, where the ANC, Action SA, EFF are more competitive. It is a DA area, but the ANC, the EFF, Action SA are players in that area. And what will worry the DA greatly is, yes, they won the ward, but if you look at the suburb of Littleton, the Freedom Front, and this is where most of the voters in the ward are, actually beat the DA. They beat them in both voting districts, and the DA will be greatly concerned about its fall. What saved the DA's bacon was the area of De Hoovers, where they are traditionally relatively the weakest in. Here they did incredibly well. By the way, I just want to mention the ANC quickly, because as we know, they
All right, so this part's not really relevant to the discussion, but as you can hear, and this is what I really like about Wayne, he explains all of the breakdowns in each of the voting districts. So you hear that De Hoovers is a little bit of a weaker place for the DA, but then obviously the Freedom Front was pretty much non-existent there. And he really gives that great vision of what the political landscape is. But the problem that I have is the fact that he never really talks about the actual number of voters that each party got. And he never compares this to past results. Now, I'm going to show you on a separate graph why I think this is a grave oversight. So those of you who follow the channel may have seen my by-election analysis on this specific ward. And we saw how the DA almost lost to the Freedom Front Plus. But what Wayne didn't explain is why the Freedom Front Plus came within 250 votes of beating the DA. Now, if you take a look at my analysis that I gave, and you can see both the graph and the figures right here, you can see how the DA suffered a massive drop in support. Yes, people will say, oh, it was only 57% to 53%. But in actual fact, they went down from almost 6,000 votes to just 1,629 votes. I mean, that is catastrophic. And you can see on the graph on the right-hand side how much they dipped. Wayne didn't really talk about this at all, and neither did any of the other elections analysts. We then see how the Freedom Front Plus got their highest ever total in this by-election, and that's very impressive because, as Wayne rightfully mentioned, they did very well in the two voting districts that are their strongholds, and this managed to get them their highest total ever, which is fantastic for them because normally by-elections see a lower voter turnout, not a higher voter turnout. And so two things are actually happening at once. On one hand, the DEA's support in the area virtually collapsed. And on the other hand, the Freedom Front Plus is really managing to mobilize their potential voter base. And unfortunately, it just doesn't seem that any other analyst has picked up on this trend. Now, my small criticism of Wayne is exactly that. It's small, it's minor. I think he does a fantastic job overall. But now I'm going to go on to what I call a catastrophic mistake by Gareth van Onselen. So for those of you who might know, he's also quite a famous elections analyst. I think he's head of Victory Research, if I'm not mistaken. And he is in an interview here with Alec Hogg on Biz News where he's explaining his by-election tracker that he's made. Now, I think that's a fantastic thing. I really like that he's done this. Well done to him. I mean, this is not easy at all. Even when I do by-elections videos just for one ward, it takes a long time to compile data. So well done. But again, because he doesn't focus on the actual number of voters, but rather these percentages, which everybody seems fixated on, he is going to make probably the worst assessment I've ever heard of what's actually going on with the DA at the moment. And I'll explain why after the video. But before that, just to give you a bit of context here, he's going through his DA election tracker with Alec Hogg, and he's going to be speaking about how the DA seems to have improved since the 2019 election. Have a listen.
Elections in that year. And you can see that its average, which is around 3840, is obviously inflated from what its actual LGE performance is. And the reason is because it's not as selective as the Freedom Front or the PA, but it is far more selective than the ANC. So it, to a far greater degree, is able to choose by-elections which will show growth where it has a chance of winning. So you have to look at its performance comparatively. So where does it stack up compared to previous years? And if we zoom out a little bit, you can see that its curve is starting to slope upwards. It went dramatically down during the first cycle, 2011 to 2016. It then declined more in the 2016 to 2021 cycle. And the 21 cycle we're in, you're starting to see an improvement now. if you look between the years 2022 and 2024, you can see a real steep curve in the DA's support, where it goes from 38 to 45 to 57 in 2024 as an average. And I think that is the product of a recovery from the disastrous 2019 election, more coherence, a better kind of leadership offer to the public that was more captivating and interesting. Its problem is that since then there has been a steady decline. It dropped in 2024 down to 37 in 2025. It is on the increase in 2026. It's up to 47.3. Again, it's early days in 2026. We need to see how much further that graph goes. But it is encouraging for the DA, and it definitely seems to have bucked a trend from, the early 2011, 2016 cycle.
And
So this is probably the worst analysis I've ever heard. I'm sorry, but I can't actually stay silent about it. It's a terrible analysis. He talks about how the DA are improving now because they've got more coherent leadership and they're more exciting to the public. But both of these assessments are completely false. He's looking at these percentages, and fair, he sees the percentages on the graph and he sees how it seems like the DA is doing so well. Oh my God, they're now up to 57%. But what he's not considering is the actual number, the raw number of voters who are actually showing up to the polls. And what I'm going to now do is I'm going to show you a table that I made that actually tracks the proper number of voters showing up for the DA in each election. So before I even get into the numbers here, I just cannot believe that Gareth has said that they have more coherent leadership. I mean, anybody who's watching what's been going on in the last few months can pretty much say that John Steenhuisen is the worst leader that party's ever had. He's an absolute disaster. We've seen what happened with him with the foot and mouth disease. I'm not going to go into all of that. I think it's been circulated in the media enough. There's nothing more that I can say that hasn't already been said. But the bottom line is this. Mmusi Maimane did a far better job electorally than Steenhuisen. If we take a look at the national elections, in 2019, Maimane got 20.77% of the vote. John Steenhuisen got 21.81%. So just by looking at percentages, you think to yourself, oh, well, that's great. He improved. But that's a lie. You see, the only reason why he improved was because of a lower voter turnout amongst other parties. Look at the raw numbers there. We see how Mmusi Maimane had over 3.6 million votes. John had about 3.5 million. And if you see the last column, which is my change in voters column, that actually compares the two elections and sees, did they grow in their number of support or did they decline? John Steenhuisen's DA in 2024 lost 115,000 votes compared to 2019 when we're looking at the national ballot. That is a really substantial decline. And unfortunately, it seems that these sorts of analysts, they're just refusing to acknowledge that. I don't understand why it is that they're so fixated on the percentage. And I get it. Percentage is important because that's what gives you your number of seats at the end of the day. Fine. But it's actually the number of voters turning out who affect your percentage. And so in reality, the DA should be highly concerned. He then talks about how they did such a poor job and had to basically recalibrate, under Steenhuisen because obviously Maimane was such a disaster. But again, this is such a blatant lie. Let's go look at the municipal election result. Now, we've already seen how Maimane did better on the national level. But if we look at the municipal election results for the DA, in 2016, under Mmusi Maimane, they got their best ever municipal election result. How is that incoherence? How is that a party that's in a state of disaster, whereas somehow Steenhuisen righted the ship? Because from what I'm seeing, Steenhuisen lost almost 3 million votes in 2021, although that is with the ward and PR ballots combined. So it's probably about half of that. He probably only lost around 1.5 million, but still, 1.5 million is a massive number of votes. And so my question is, why is it that these analysts are just so fixated on they've almost got tunnel vision. They only look at certain aspects without looking at the full picture. I just don't understand it. But hey, maybe I'm alone in my assessments of the situation. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Thanks so much for tuning into this video. If you found it informative, please remember to subscribe to the channel for more content. And yeah, let me know. Do you also feel that these analysts need to sort of take off their blind spots and really understand the full picture and give us as the public a full picture? Let me know. Until next time, I'm Matthew Cohen, and this is the Power Pod.